friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to show you how I make my elderberry tincture, and I'll also be talking a little bit about how I use it at least and give suggestions on how you can use it. So this is somewhat similar to my elderberry spice syrup, except for I'm doing this in the form of a tincture. Now, if you're interested in the syrup recipe, I'll be putting that in the description box down below because there are some differences to that and it does not involve any alcohol whatsoever. But this one I will be making with vodka if I have enough here. I found I actually do have some left. I need to stock up on some more of that. And if not, then I'll be adding some of the tequila that was left over from my son's wedding reception a few years ago. Because really you can use any spirit you want. In this case, I really wanted to go with a more clear spirit so I could show the differences of how it looks when you start it better and then how it looks when it's finished. This one is all finished. It was the last one I started and it's over 2 months old now. So it's definitely ready to be used now or whenever I'm ready for it, which I'm not. But it's so dark right now, you can barely see some of the stuff that's still in there since I haven't bothered to strain it out yet. And I won't strain it out until I'm ready for it. And yes, that's perfectly fine to do. I get a lot of questions from people that say, oh, I forgot about this tincture I started a year ago. Is it still good? It should be, especially if you're using a higher proof alcohol. I mean, even if you were using wine, it should still be. I've had some I've made with wine or a mixture of honey and wine that lasted several years without even refrigerating it. So let's go ahead and get to my basic recipe. Now, when I made this one back here, I just made it up as I went. Now I'm going to be adding at least one other thing I did not add to this one. And I just am kind of making up the amounts as I go just to give you something to work off of, since when I do stuff like this is how I do it. I just throw it together, whatever looks right. So let's go ahead and start with the elderberries, since that's the main ingredient. And I'm thinking about a half cup of dried elderberries. If you're using fresh elderberries or ones that you'd previously frozen in their fresh state, then you might want to use up to a cup. Right in this jar is approximately a quart jar. Whoops. What it actually is a recycled green olive jar. And I can't remember, I think it actually holds a little bit better than a quart. But I'm thinking a half cup of the elderberries, since they're dried, looks about right to me. So you can see how it fills up the bottom of the jar. So if you were to use fresh ones, you would want them at least up to here. Now, you can make your tincture with just that and your spirit of choice. But I do like to add more things to it for the purpose of their own unique benefits that they add to it, just like I do with my elderberry syrup. So one of those things is going to be my dehydrated ginger. Well, it's not my ginger, I didn't grow it, but I get the organic ginger from Azure Standard, and yes, I leave the peels on when I go to dehydrate them, and I like to get them in the wintertime and just stock up on them and then cut them up and dehydrate them, because I can then use my wood stove since they dehydrate up beautifully next to the wood stove. And I'm gonna say at least an 1/8 cup. This is a 1/4 cup right here, measuring cup. So an 1/8 cup would look about like that. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and put a 1/4 cup of that in there, of the dried ginger. Now I'm going to take a couple of citrus peels. Make sure whatever citrus peels you add, if you choose to add them, that they came from organic fruit, so you know there's no pesticides or other such in there. And depending on the size of the citrus peels, what is that? Maybe about a 1/4 or an 1/8 of a cup citrus peels. Oh, we'll throw a couple more in there for good measure. That way we can get a little vitamin C out of that as well. Of course, you get vitamin C in the elderberries as well. For the star anise is especially good for helping with flus. So let's go ahead and throw in, I wrote down 2, I think I'm going to put in 4 into my jar. And for the cinnamon stick, again, organic, I use Ceylon cinnamon in this case. As much of my herbs and spices I don't already grow, I get as many as I can from Azure Standard, and that's now where I get my cinnamon sticks. Now, I think in that one there, I only put 1 cinnamon stick, but you can put 2 if you so choose. Some cinnamon sticks are cut shorter anyway, so if that's the case, these are like, I think the 4-inch ones, I think you can get 3-inch cuts. So if they're 3-inch, I would suggest 2. Just tailor this to suit you. If there's anything in here that you can't use, then just leave it out. It's that simple. Now right here I have my own homegrown marshmallow root. I definitely want to put at least 1/4 cup of the marshmallow root in there. Marshmallow root is especially good for helping with throats, any of your mucous membranes. It's going to help with that. It's very, very soothing. It has many other great benefits as well, but in this case, for what I'm using it for, definitely for the throat. Now, here's the new thing I'm adding to this particular batch, but not new to my elderberry syrup, is astragalus root. So I'm just going to grab a few of these. I recommend in this case getting pieces that are either cut or sliced like this. I think the slices are probably best for tincturing. I just threw a piece on the floor. So we'll put that much in there. So the jar is already getting pretty full. I've got one more ingredient to add, one more spice, and that's my cloves. Now the nice thing about cloves, besides having natural antiviral, antibacterial properties, antibiotic properties, is that they also will help to numb the throat. So if you're using it specifically for your throat, and I'll get to that in a little bit, then I highly recommend adding cloves, again, if you're not allergic to them and you can handle them. In this case, you can do just a small, like 10 cloves. It's easy to get too much. I'm putting in, it's not even 1/8 of a cup. I'm going to put in that much, which is still quite a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and do that because of its numbing effects and how I plan to use this. So there we go. There's all the dry ingredients in there. And again, you can use fresh elderberries. Just keep in mind, because of the water content, you're going to want to use more in there. I prefer using dried when I'm making a tincture, so I'm not watering anything down. And I believe that makes a stronger tincture. Now, some people would argue that the fresh will have more benefits. Well, generally speaking, typically, like when you're making a syrup, you're going to cook it anyway. I'm not worried about cooking these because of the way I'm using it. I see absolutely no need. I've been using it like this for years. So let's go ahead and pour this vodka. Whatever vodka you got, whatever spirit you want. Vodka's nice because it's both clear and it's one of the cheapest spirits that you can get. And it looks like I might actually have enough, maybe. I had exactly enough. Look at that. Filled it right up to the top. Now you see how clear that is. Now in this one I used, I can't remember what I used in it. It was, I think it was more of the tequila that I thought I was finally using up the last of it. And you can see this has a slightly gold color. So it had a little bit of color to it, but it really doesn't take long for those elderberries to start infusing their color into this. And this is why I wanted to use the clear so you could see it better. So I've got my lid on there and I'm going to go ahead and shake that up really good. And then you'll probably start seeing the color infusing quite quickly into the alcohol. And see, as the stuff settles, I can already see color in there. I don't know if that's showing for you well enough. So then the next step is to allow it to tincture. You're going to want to make sure you date it like I did with this here. I just simply use a piece of masking tape and put that on there and then date it, mark what it is, especially if you're doing lots of various different types of tinctures or even the same kind, but starting them at different times. Make sure you label and date it so you know when you started it. This one, for instance, I started at the end of August. So it's definitely ready, but I'm not, again, in a hurry to use it. So I just leave it. So 2 months is my minimum standard time that I'll go by. Some people say 4 to 6 weeks. Some will say 6 to 8 weeks. I say 2 months minimum. For any tincture, I don't care what kind I'm making, I always leave everything, even my infused oils, a minimum of 2 months. And then I don't worry about straining them until I need them. So I've had infused oils and tinctures sitting for as long as a year or more before I finally got to them and then strain them out. With your oils, as long as your herbs were dry going in there, there's no concern of spoilage because there's no moisture in there, just the oil and the herbs. Same thing here. I'm using all dried ingredients plus a spirit, which is a natural preservative anyway. And like I said, even if I was just using my homemade wine, which doesn't have near as much alcohol content, I still would not have any concern of this. When you consider how long people store wine or even buy wines that have been stored for, made back in the 1950s or earlier and pay big money for it, I don't concern myself with spoilage in that. And so again, I just let it sit. There will come a point where some things where it's the alcohol or whatever your solvent is has pulled out everything it possibly can. But my personal opinion for a lot of things, especially this kind of stuff, because you're talking harder, woodier items or even the dried berries, the longer you let it sit, the more it's going to pull out of there. So I say leave it as long as you can, no less than 2 months. So then let's talk about using it. Now, because a tincture is going to be much stronger than like your elderberry syrup, you're going to need far less of it. Like when I'm taking the elderberry syrup to help prevent or help cure or soothe cough, colds, flus, sore throats, whatever, I'm going to use anywhere from a half of a shot to a whole shot. It's just made with water and raw honey are the only liquid ingredients in there, which by the way, I don't add the raw honey until I'm done making the tea part, the decoction part of the elderberry syrup. I let it cool to room temperature and then I add the raw honey, so I'm not destroying the benefits of the raw honey when I do that. So, but with the tincture, the higher the spirit, so some people do like to use Everclear, which is not my personal choice, and I don't even personally recommend it, but to each their own. But the point is, the higher the proof, the higher the alcohol content, the less of it you should need. Maybe just a drop or two. And in fact, it's always best when you're making a tincture for the first time just to start with a couple of drops to make sure you don't have a reaction to it and to see how much you really need to get it to work. And then you can work your way up to maybe a teaspoon. I doubt you would even need as much as a tablespoon, but I don't personally think you would need that much or even need more than that. But you got to, again, find out what's going to work best for you. It's also going to depend on each individual person. So let's say you're making this for you and your family. Maybe you might find out along the way, you might need a whole tablespoon, but somebody else in your family may be fine off just a teaspoon or less. So you got to experiment and don't assume there's one right dosage for everyone, which is why I never give dosages. People have to figure that out for themselves by starting small and working up. So the purpose of the elderberry tincture, if you're taking it in that form, is to help prevent getting colds and flus. So let's say people around you are getting sick, the people you work with, your family, you can start taking this once a day to help prevent it. Or if you already are sick, you take it to help cure the illness. So my purpose of the tincture, I like using the elderberry syrup for that. But the reason I like having the tincture, especially with the spirit, is because of how I use it, and that is as a throat spray. So right here is my bottle here of my oldest elderberry tincture. And this one was initially made with just elderberries, no added goodies like I did in these two here. And I think I used vodka in that. And so I use this as a throat spray, especially when I'm doing my live shows, because I'm talking straight for such a long period of time. My throat, the nodules that I've had in my vocal cords from a lifetime of singing and teaching dance and martial arts, and I developed them in my early 40s. Well, what will happen is when I'm doing a lot of talking and a lot of video shooting and such, these start to swell up and get very itchy. And sometimes it makes me cough, sometimes they get sore, and so I can keep this on hand, especially when I'm doing my live shows, and just spray that in there to help numb it, and then I can continue my show in most cases. Now, the other thing though is if I do get a cough or cold, this is something I'm going to use to help curb the cough or the sore throat, because the alcohol and the cloves both have that numbing effect on the throat, which can just stop a cough really quickly and soothe a sore throat. And again, that's the other reason why I'm adding the marshmallow root, because it's very soothing to a sore throat. And then again, the rest of the herbs and spices are more for their benefits because of their antiviral and antibacterial properties to help your body quickly get better if that's the case. So I'm making the tincture actually as a multi-purpose use, but the number one use is for a throat spray. It's something I've been meaning to come up with for a long time. And I finally got around to doing it when I remembered I already had that elderberry tincture I'd made years ago, and I keep forgetting I have it, because I always revert to my elderberry syrup instead. I just recommend leaving it on your counter for at least a few days so you can remember to shake it up every so often. But then you can put it back in storage and forget about it until you need it after that. So let me reiterate yet again that to remember that this is all about tailoring this to suit you. You do not have to follow my recipe to the T. I'm just sharing with you and giving you an example what I do. But if you want to do just the elderberries, use just the elderberries. You can add more if you would like. If you want to add maybe just the astragalus root with the elderberries or just the marshmallow root, you can do that. You can leave out anything that you might have a reaction to, can't have, don't like, or maybe just don't even have on hand, and just keep it as simple as you want, just like I did when I made the very first elderberry tincture, which I think I have a picture of that, years ago, with just the vodka and the dried elderberries. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any thoughts, ideas you would like to share, or even some questions, please put them in comments down below, and I'll try to get to your questions as soon as possible, or maybe approach them in a live show down the road. And thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.